Well, today is step number 1 on our journey to be. We have done the steps before, and we're reviewing the steps again. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm breaking down the year into 13-week quarters, and 8 of those 13 weeks are going to be going over the steps of the journey to be, the 8 steps of the journey to be. And then the rest of the weeks will be other issues and topics and things like that that we'll be preaching on. So today is step number 1. Step number 1 of the journey to be is I need something. I need forgiveness, healing, connection, whatever the case may be. I have a hole in my life that I can't fill on my own. I've tried. I can't fill it on my own. So today for the Hot Fudge Sunday, I thought I would come to you from our chapel. Our chapel is where every night we have a nightly NA meeting, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So in this room, they talk, of course, about the 12 steps of recovery, addiction recovery. And yes, the 8 steps of the journey to be are similar. They're familiar. If someone has gone through a 12-step process, they will recognize and understand the concepts of the 8 steps. But really, when you think about it, each and every single one of us are on a journey. Whether we're on a 12-step journey, trying to overcome an addiction, or we're simply on a journey to figure out who we are. All of us are there on a journey to figure out who we are, who God has created us to be. And step 1 starts at that very place where we just need something. We know there's got to be something more to life than what we've experienced up to this point. And so that's what we were talking about today. Talking about that concept of what it's like to live in a place where you know that there's something more. You know there's more to life. You know there's more to the everyday existence. But you just can't figure out what it is. And we talked about how so many people, some of you who are watching this right now, that's exactly where you are. You live your life in that place where you wake up every single day and you say, I need something. I know there's something more. I just don't know what it is. And you try drugs. You try alcohol. You try relationships. You try money. You try stuff. You try all these things that you can to try to fill that hole. And as we talked about this morning, every single one of those things that you try will work for a little bit. And eventually it's going to crash. Eventually it's going to crash and burn. Because we talked about the fact that there is a hole that each one of us has in our lives. And it's a God-shaped hole. In Genesis it says that we are created in the image of God. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I look like God or God looks like me. But that there is a piece of God that's a part of us. Part of all of us in our creation. There is a God-shaped hole. And only God can fill that hole. Only God can speak into that. The deep calls out to the deep, as it says in Scripture. And only God can fill that hole. And we try to fill it with everything. Every single person who's ever been alive and will ever be alive has had that same notion. There's something more. There's something more to this thing called life. I need something. And I'm trying to find it. And step 1 is coming to the terms of not having all the answers. So we talked about the fact that in step number 1, we don't mention God, we don't mention Jesus, we don't mention the Bible, we don't mention religion, we don't mention anything like that. Step number 1 is merely coming to that place where you will admit and acknowledge that you need something. That you need help, that you have a hole in your life that you can't fill on your own. And we looked at Ecclesiastes in chapter 2, and we were looking at that passage where King Solomon was talking about all the stuff that he had done. And we were looking at verses 4 through 11, and in those verses, he just 4 through 10, just those verses, he uses the word I 13 times. I've done this, I've conquered this, I've bought this, I've built this. And that notion of the understanding of step number 1 is coming to the terms to say there's no I in God. There's no I in this whole equation because of the fact that we will mess things up. Left to our own devices, we're going to mess it up. And that's what we all do in our life. We mess it up if we focus just on the I. And so looking at step number 1 is coming to that place where we realize that we need something and we can't do it on it. We can't fill that hole on our own. We've tried. We acknowledge it, we embrace it, we own it, and we say, now I need help. And that's the first step in the journey to be. The journey to be who God has called you and created you to be. So tune in next week for step number 2 of the journey to be.